This application note is primarily targeted at the graphic artist, and it's going to help you understand how to prepare images for use by the SHIPTide Rapid GUI development environment. Most images are going to be created in Illustrator, potentially in Photoshop, but Illustrator really is the best place to create your raw material for a GUI. SHIPTide doesn't even begin to attempt to replace the great tools that Adobe has available to you, and it's expected that your marketing people will have Illustrator-capable folks, or you'll contract a graphic designer who will have Illustrator experience. You can always get Illustrator yourself. The new Adobe Creative Cloud allows you to license Illustrator for as little as $29 a month, or actually even cheaper if you buy an annual subscription. So you can get access to Illustrator reasonably cost-effectively now. You may also want to get Fireworks, and in our experience, they work very well together as a pair. Once you add Fireworks and maybe Photoshop along with that, you're probably looking at the larger bundle, which is about $70 a month from Creative Cloud. So, preparing images from Illustrator. I've got a standard vector image here that I've created with some buttons, and it's a button with some gradients, and if you know how to use Illustrator, this will be pretty straightforward to get to this point. If not, there's a ton of video training for Adobe on the web, on YouTube, and it will be a little bit of a hard slog if you're just getting used to Illustrator, but once you get there, you'll really like the capabilities. But this is a vector drawing, not a bitmap. And as a result, it can scale very, very well in Illustrator as a vector drawing. But we need to get it into SHIP and turn it eventually into a bitmap, so that it can be rendered on the screen. And we may want multiple versions or multiple sizes of this button. And in this particular project, I've got a few different, I've got a square wave and a triangle wave button and a sine wave button for whatever GUI I'm working on right now. And I've got the dark blue background, and I've got the light blue background. So I've got a bunch of different combinations on different layers depending on the effect I'm looking for. I may want a button that has the light blue if it's pressed, and the dark blue look if it's unpressed, for instance. Whatever I'm looking at on the screen is what I'm going to be able to export. So, assuming that you've figured out how to use Adobe and created your vector images, the next step is to export them into a directory that you can import into SHIPTide. So let's do the selection you're going to use, and I'm using CS6 here, is Save for Web. So if I do that, up will come this dialog box like this, and you can zoom in and see your at a little higher resolution what's going on here. Now, notice that we've got a little bit of jaggies going on, a little bit of anti-aliasing. A couple of things you want to know. First of all, CS6 Illustrator export for web, the PNG 8 setting is unfortunately broken. There still has not been a fix issued from Adobe a year later after the release. So you're going to want to probably output this in PNG 24. If it has transparency at all, use PNG 24. If it's opaque, use a bitmap, or BMP or a JPEG. JPEG's fine. But if you're using if you want transparency and you want that alpha channel, use PNG 24. We're going to output it as PNG 24, not PNG 8. Make sure transparency is selected, and you'll probably, the matte doesn't really matter because it's a transparent image. Okay, now the image size is the pixel size, of course, that you're going to export to this PNG. And it's a bit of a guess until you get the feel of the GUI that you're working on. What you want is a little bit of a balance. We can resize things from a pixel perspective within SHIPTide. Of course, if you're looking for a 16 by 16 image, you probably want to go right for that directly from Illustrator, because pixel scaling at that point is going to create a lot of weird effects. And whatever you do, don't, of course, export something too small that when you try to blow it up and make it bigger, it looks really jaggy. So you probably want something close to the normal size that you're going to use on the screen within SHIPTide. And you can always replace the images if you don't like it, whatever you want. So I'm going to take this image, and I'm going to make it, and I'm going to leave it proportional. I'm going to make it 100 wide by 40. Actually, I know in my GUI that I'm probably going to want my buttons to be about 48 pixels high. So now I've got, and of course I just say save, and I can pick any directory I want. So I've got a images directory up on my desktop, and I'm going to save this as a, what is this? My dark blue saw wave. Dark blue, or no, saw a triangle wave button. And I'm going to save that as a PNG into that directory. And now I've done. Now I'm going to bring up Fireworks. Now Fireworks has a great ability to do bulk translation of images from PNG 24 to PNG 8, and it does a really good job of picking a palette. And so I'm going to use the batch process within Fireworks. I'm going to go to my desktop and go to that images directory, and here's that file. I can add about 50 files at once if I want to do a whole bunch at the same time. And I really only have to do this once until my images are brought in and they're fine within SHIPTide. So I'm going to go to Export, and I'm going to the settings. I'm going to choose, if I choose a custom, let's do PNG 8. Adaptive, 256 colors is good. I definitely want to select alpha transparency and make sure my matte is gone, so I have no matte. And there we go. Alpha transparency, remove unused colors, PNG 8, adaptive. There we go. Okay, so that's the setting I want to use for this particular batch process. I can actually save that as my own little preferred setting, which I have actually. So if you go back, you'll notice that I'm going to remove this. If you add the export, I've actually got a little ship PNG 8 alpha right here. And if I look at that setting, it's got all my settings. Except, oops, my matte is incorrect. And I'm going to save that. And now I can go next, and I can just go run. And it just processed one batch. Okay. So now, if I go to that directory, and you see this dark blue triangle wave button, and I look at the properties of that file, you'll see in the details that it has an 8-bit depth, 120 by 48, and so that's a PNG 8. And in reality, it's only 2K large. It's a pretty small file. Okay, now, if we flip over to Ship, and we can go into images right here and say add a new image, or we can use the image import function, import media right here, or Control I. And I can go up and go to my desktop and go to that images directory and choose that file. I can give it a name right here, and I can copy it right into my project. And there we go. Now I have my dark blue triangle wave button right in my project. And instead of this Sirius logo, I'm going to drag this over and attach it to this box right here, replace the logo with that image, and there we go. We now have our button in the project. And I can go in and manually readjust the width and height of the resource right here, and it will, let's say I make this 60, let's just cut it in half, by 24. And now that image has automatically resized at the bitmap level. Now that, of course, isn't necessarily the best resizing. You really do want to do your best resizing work within Illustrator, of course, and then bring it through the process. But once you've created your assets, this is pretty much a one-way process and one time. Now, if you go back to Illustrator, what you might want to do, and this is what I recommend to start off with, as the graphic artist, create your storyboard in Illustrator with all your components. So you might want to, if you know you're going to target, let's say a Sim 225, and that's a 480 by 272 pixel screen, do a new project and call it My New GUI, let's say, and use the pixel accurate artboard and use your artboard at 480 by 272. Now your artboard is going, units pixels of course, now your artboard is going to be the size and an aspect ratio of the screen. And if you start with this artboard and lay out your artboard the way you want it with all the ingredients on all these layers, you can then create your storyboard, show it to marketing, work with the marketing team, the engineering team, and then when you export your assets, they're all going to be at the right size. You can bulk export all those assets into a directory, process them if you want into 8-bit using Fireworks. If it works. Some of those images may be too rich in color to go down to 8-bit. You don't have to. You can leave them 24-bit with alpha. And then once you've brought all those assets into the GUI, you've effectively transitioned from the Adobe realm into the SHIPTide realm. So to review, I would recommend that you start off with an artboard the size of the target screen to start off with. You create your various images and drop them on the artboard. So for instance, this one here I could take and select, let's see, I'm going to select all these, and I'm going to drop it on my artboard over here, and lay out my screen with all my buttons the way I want them. Once I've got that, I'm going to want to go in and make sure that's all layers, and each object is on its layer, so I can go select the layer and then export that layer if I want to a file, to an individual PNG. I'm going to use the file export save for web function. And when I use the save for web function, of course I've still got the whole artboard shown. I want to make sure my artboard is the size of the object, and I want to export with PNG 24 transparency for the size that I want. Save it as a 24-bit PNG. You don't have to go through the 8-bit stage to start off with. You can just leave it as a 24-bit PNG. Go into SHIPTide and then just import your media by pointing to one or more files. So if you have a big directory full of images, you can select a whole bunch of files. It'll give you a big list right here. You can copy them all, give them all names, say go, and it'll suck all those images into your resource area just like that.